And here we go again for another weekend wrap. I'm joined tonight by Macca23 and Nikki. How you going, guys?
Bad. Both speak at the same time. Not too bad, thank you.
How are you, Macca?
Yeah, I'm great, mate. Disappointed with our game, but overall, even though it was a win, disappointed.
Yeah, it was a bit lacklustre, wasn't it? And we'll certainly have a little bit to talk about tonight. First of all, though, as we usually do, we'll just go through the round's results. Pretty predictable round this week, I would have thought. Friday night, we had, obviously, the Swans getting up over the Hawks. I kind of thought that might have happened. I don't know about you guys, but Hawks looked a little flat.
I tipped the Swans.
Same.
Yeah. Saturday we had, surprisingly, probably the most surprising result of the round was Collingwood getting up over Geelong by 4 goals. That was a good result for them. Keeps the dream alive for the Magpies. We had West Coast just hanging on against the Power. West Coast seemed to take the foot off the pedal, which I don't know why they would have done that with their first, or was it first win away this year? I reckon it is.
No, it was the loss of Gaff that really did it, because he was the one who was providing the run, and then all of a sudden they didn't have that anymore.
Nicky's right on the money there. That great big elbow to Gaff's head and taking him out took the run out of the West Coast.
Yeah. We had the Kangaroos toweling up a disappointing Carlton. I thought Carlton might actually put up a bit of a fight, but the Roos won by over 10. Richmond getting up over the Dockers at Domain. I reckon the Dockers are pretty much in tank mode now. Richmond should never have won by that much. And then today we had the D's having a pretty good win over the Lions by about 10 goals. We had the Giants confirming their premiership status. I reckon they're a legitimate threat this year. The only thing that'll do them in will be inexperience, I reckon, on the big stage. But they beat a depleted Western Bulldogs by 25. And we had the Saints running out comfortably 8 goals or so over the Bombers. So, I don't know, guys, not too many surprising results. Probably the Collingwood one. I don't know. I didn't watch the game. Any of you guys watch that game?
It was on at the same time as ours, so a little bit difficult. Watch the end of it.
I watched it, but I thought Collingwood played very, very well, and they jumped Geelong early. Geelong looked so inept. I don't know. I couldn't really understand why they were so inept. But they got a very good lead. I think if the game had gone on longer, maybe Geelong might have got up. But no, the bird had flown.
Big Mason Cox running bounce and goal to just about seal it. It's a good time story, that one.
Yeah,
well, for me, what I think happened was that Geelong played their grand final last week. They'd set that game against us. And so that's why they came out and thought, oh, yeah, this is just going to happen. And Collingwood just had the foot on the pedal from the start.
Yeah, they looked very flat.
They did, and you never know, Nick. They probably did set themselves for that game, considering the build-up with Paddy and all the rest of it. But I was still surprised that Collingwood got over the top of them. Leaves us with a ladder that looks relatively set, except for 8th spot. We've got the Kangaroos clearly out in front, 2 games in front now, on 36 points.
With bad percentage.
Yeah, well, 130 is not bad. It's just not as good as some of the other teams.
They're going to need that 2 games in front, though. They've got a horror run home.
Yep, I can still see them finishing top 4. They've done everything that you could have asked from them, really. And all you can do is win the games that are in front of you, I reckon, Nick. And you're right, I don't think they'll hang on top spot. I don't think they hang on the top spot, but I think they make top 4, and from there anything can happen. 3 teams on 28 points, the Cats, the Giants and the Swans in that order. Pretty close percentage-wise there. And then we've got the Bulldogs, the Eagles and the Hawks on 24 points. Notably, 2 of those 3 teams had losses, the Bulldogs and the Hawthorn. And then you've got us in the 8 on percentage, and it's only 5% now in front of the D's, who aren't going too badly. And with our little stretch over the next couple of weeks, very easily see the Demons overtaking us in 8th spot, at least temporarily. And then it falls away. Obviously, we won't bother about the bottom 8 because I reckon the top 8, well, the top 9 is pretty much set. Possibly the only team outside of the top 9 that might have a sneaky chance is Collingwood if they continue this form. But I don't know about you guys, but I reckon, as we said last week, Macca, I reckon 8th spot at the very least is ours to lose.
Yeah, it's there for the taking, and we look at our run now, Bickley was on 5AA. He was doing the ladder predictor, and he didn't have us losing too many more games from now on, and he didn't have us finishing in the top 4, but he did have us finishing around about 6th at the end of the minor round, and I think that's about where we will lob.
I think that's a fair assessment of where we're actually at. And I remember we did the preview of preseason podcast, Phoenix, and we talked about what we thought would be a good result. And we thought finishing about the same spot as what we did last year, we thought was a fair result. Are we still thinking along those lines?
Oh, look, I think so. I think pass mark, considering the loss of danger, and, I think people probably were a bit seduced by early season form, but it's been shown over the last few rounds that we really do miss him, and it's going to take probably another season before we really cover that midfield hole that he left. So, 5th to 7th is probably about right at the moment, but but for a couple of brain fades, could have been a little bit better. We could have been sitting around about the 4th, 28 points with a couple of those close losses. Never mind. That's the round as it looked. Let's have a look at the Gold Coast game. What are your initial thoughts, Macca? What did you think of the game overall?
It was funny because while we won the game, I was left with a rather empty feeling at the end of the game, thinking that, we weren't that good. And the reason for that is that the Gold Coast put out a very, very depleted side. They didn't have many guns at all. And I thought for the first 3 quarters, we probably did what we should have done. And in the last quarter, we didn't do very much at all, except about the last 5 minutes of the game. We got a couple of goals to square the last quarter. And it just didn't really inspire me at all to think that we were really going somewhere at all this season, if that's the best we can do against them. And, that sounds a bit harsh when it's a 75-point win, but that's the way I felt after the game.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Nick?
Yeah, I kind of felt a bit meh. I was still quite pleased to see McGovern, Miller, and particularly Charlie backing up his good form from last week. That run down the wing, as they called it at the time, that little bit of arrogance that I'm just going to run away with you. And it was a beautiful pass as well to Gov. I actually was quite pleased with that. I thought Lyons, we said at the time when he was dropped that it was tough. And yes, he doesn't have high possession, but the quality of his kicking into our forward 50 and Tex getting a bit of form back.
Yeah, it's certainly good to see Tex get on the end of a few. He looked to be jumping as confidently as he has all season, really, which was a good sign. Going up with 2 hands, hitting the contest hard, took a nice little semi-specky at one stage. So that was good to see him back in form. I'll just go through. I mean, my own personal view is that it was a very strange game because we win by 70-odd points, and yet for mine it actually highlighted our deficiencies because really against a NEFL team, we should have won by 110, 120 really. So I wouldn't actually, if I was the Adelaide Football Club, I wouldn't be overly happy with an 11-12 goal win. But some of the key stats, we certainly got our kick-to-handball ratio back on track. We won the disposal count by 30-ish, and 224 kicks to 171 handballs is probably back around where we want it to be. Aside from that, 71 inside 50s to 35 suggests that we should have scored a heck of a lot more than what we did. We basically travelled at about 3 inside 50s per goal. And the interesting aside to that is that the Gold Coast actually killed us on rebound inside 50s, 47 to 21. So that shows that our entry into forward 50 is still lacking, and I'm pointing the finger at Josh Jenkins, who played like a millionaire. He should have absolutely towed up Sam Day, and the fact that he hardly got near it, and we'll go through some individual stats in a little while, I think contributed to a large degree to why we weren't terribly efficient going forward. Our disposal efficiency around the ground was up 78.5, so that's back where you want it to be. But aside from that, the only other thing that stuck out to me was goal assists. We had 20 goal assists to 9, which seems to me, I don't know exactly how they measure that stat, but it seems to me that we were passing the ball around a lot and probably overusing it a bit in the end, which is sometimes a danger when you're playing a team that is undermanned and not putting up, trying hard but not really putting up too much pressure. Anything in the stats stick out for you guys out of all that lot?
Yeah, well, I think you summed that up pretty well. Nicky raised a good point before. I thought one of the highlights of the game was the fact that some of the lesser lights did pretty well. And Miller showed a little bit of magic at times that made you think he's going to really honour that number 23 Guernsey, because some of the tricks remind me a little bit of Macca, the things that he did. Charlie Cameron showed a lot more versatility in terms of that he can run through the midfield. I don't think he's hard enough or fit enough to do it for very long regularly at this stage. But I think he's got a real career ahead of him, this boy. He's got more tricks than we thought he had. And McGovern, well, he's only a rookie and in terms of experience, but he did pretty well too. So I think some of the lesser lights, I thought they did very well. Your point about Jenkins is very, very valid. You really had a go at him last week for hanging back and just seagulling on the ball at the back, and that's what he was trying to do all day.
Interestingly, though, he was being played a lot higher than what we normally do. I think Pike was actually playing around a little bit because there were some different setups going on. And I noticed the fact that he was playing more of a lead-up role instead of staying back.
We certainly played McGovern deeper for a lot of the game. It seemed to me that McGovern was almost our last forward, playing quite deep. You're right, Josh did play a little bit higher, but he just didn't demand the ball, Nick.
No, he didn't.
Against Sammy Day, who's a forward at best, and is pinch hitting it in the back line, and Sammy Day's commitment is already a little bit questionable at times. Josh Jenkins should have towed him up. It was a day for Jenkins to dominate, as Tommy Lynch did, and I just thought Josh I think rates himself at the moment. I think he's listening to his own hype and probably listening to his manager who's pumping him up for a contract. And he's got to get back to actually giving us some value.
Well, the only thing I will say is that if he's going to have a game like that, that's the game to have it in rather than against a good team. Because when we play a good team, we need him to play at his very, very best.
Yeah, look, that's true. I mean, there are a few things that stuck out to me on the individual numbers. We only had one midfielder over 25 possessions for the game. Rory had 27, and he sort of came in and out of it, but still ended up with 27 disposals, which was a team high. Their midfield, their mainstream midfield of Prestia, Lonergan, Malcheski and Riccitelli had 24, but Malcheski had 25. Lonergan had 27, thought played really well, actually. And Prestia, playing on 1.5 legs, basically had 31 posies. And was
apparently doing a job on Thompson.
Yeah, look, and he has done in the past. And it just, again, a very disappointing output from our midfielders in a game that they really had precious little opposition.
Yeah, but that really reflects on the quality of the midfielders that we've got. Even Rory had to be critical of his game for 3 quarters because 11 of his disposals came in the last quarter. But at the moment, the lack of Dangerfield is really showing that we don't have an A-grade midfield.
No, we don't. And sorry, go on, Nick.
I just thought it was interesting that Pike actually put Charlie and Miller into that midfield as well. And it wasn't like at the end of the games, he was doing it through the middle. Eddie was going in there as well, which is what makes me think that they were testing a few things.
That's true, Nicky. That's absolutely true. I think he did use the opportunity to put those two boys through there. And actually, I thought that not totally ready for it yet, but really showed signs that they will be in the future.
I think Charlie definitely. And I don't know, Macca, my little strategy of Crouch and Charlie rotating through the forward line, mate, I still reckon that's got merit back on the back of Charlie's little cameo. He obviously hasn't the engine right now, but geez, pinch hitting in there. He looked like he's got some promise.
He certainly did.
He's got a good...
Go on, Nicky.
I was just going to say he's got a really good footy brain.
Yeah, very good. Very good. And confidence. He can break a line. He can break through a tackle. Very good. The way I saw the best players, I thought actually Tommy Lynch was our best player. 22 disposals, 16 kicks, 6 handballs, 10 marks. Kicked 2 goals, 2. Had 4 inside 50s. Went at 86.5 disposal efficiency. I reckon he 4 marks inside 50. I reckon he did pretty well as a lead-up target for us all day. I thought Tails did okay on Lynch. I thought he held his own and had 23 disposals for Tails, which is quite a high count. We were pushed. And a goal, yep. We were pushing up quite high from defence, which resulted in us getting caught over the back a little bit. I don't know whether that was by design or whether it just turned out that way. But poor old Kyle Chaney got stuck a couple of times on their tall timber and was unfairly judged, I think, on his performance because he played quite well. Brody Smith got back into some sort of form. 24 disposals, 10 inside 50s. And led the metres gained across both sides quite comfortably. It still looked a little scratchy at times, but I felt his effort was much better yesterday. Lukey Brown, I think his performance was underrated. 7
Always
and
is.
7. Yep, 6 marks. The only thing that points me about Luke is that I had him down to kick 2 goals in Scorpus's little Game of Thrones bold claim competition, and he only kicked 1. So get stuff, Luke. But yeah,
To be fair, he did kind of have to leave the ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's fair enough, but he should have had 2 to half time, really. Poor performance by Luke. He went at 100% of disposal efficiency, which is excellent. Out of the defensive half and was pretty solid. Texas' first half I thought was pretty good. Then he sort of fell away a little bit. And yeah, aside from that, I think it was a pretty even performance. How did you guys see it in terms of best players?
Just on Luke Brown, I just want to make a comment about his kicking. He is one of the very, very best kicks in our side. I remember when he had his first shot for goal, I said to my wife, geez, he's a bloody backman. I don't think he'll kick this. And he's just slotted a 50-metre goal right through the middle. And I really watched him very closely and said, I didn't realise he has such a good kick. He's a superb kick.
I think we do try and get the ball in his hands quite a bit now. Previously, he was just playing that lockdown role, but this year he's been given a lot more license to actually back himself and run. He's a lot quicker than what people expect. He's got that beautiful kick, as you said, Macca. He can kick both sides if he wants to. I haven't seen him kick too much on the left, but I think he's done it a couple of times last year, and it's still a very neat little kick that he's got there. To To me, we talk about Talia being underrated as a defender. I think you could put Brown in that as well. I think within the AFL system, most of the small forwards would know who Luke Brown is and don't want to see him come up and line up against him.
Right on the money, Nicky. Right on the money.
Yeah. Did you go? Sorry, go on.
The other one I would put in there was actually, I thought Atkins had quite a nice game.
I actually thought he was a little quiet, Nick, to be honest.
Well, because we were playing crap. We're playing crap in that midfield. As a wingman, he can't go in and get it. He's got to rely on that midfield. But when he did actually get the ball, he did some very smart things with it. Once again, that beautiful disposal that we've seen. And there were some nice little tough, hard tackles as well. And body pressure he was putting on that I was pleased to see. There was a passage of play on the outside wing where you had Villa, him and McGovern absolutely pressuring the hell out of the Gold Coast players who had the ball. And they were doing quite well. And then it gets out to the back, and it's Hendo who goes, I'm just going to stand here and, watch the Suns player kick it away.
Don't get me started on Henderson.
Yeah, don't ruin my day mentioning Hendo Gotti. I know that when he runs with the ball, he looks good and all the rest of it, but he is the weak. No, I nearly swore then.
Yeah, no.
He is terrible. No, really, he's soft. He really is soft. And, you think of somebody like Laird who's missing at the moment, who really is as tough as tungsten, and you can bash him and build him, but he'll still mark the ball and he'll still get the ball. And then you've got this seagull just hanging out the back and waiting for somebody to give it to him. And even then, he takes his time thinking about where he's going to kick it to. And, half the time he kicks it to the opposition.
I think if you actually watch the last quarter, he started to tackle and hit a bit harder. I think he was actually told.
He might have been suffering from concussion then, Nikki.
But seriously, you're a backman. You're on those players. You should not have to be told to do those things. That should be second nature to you.
You have to be
Otherwise,
desperate.
Get out of my team.
I agree with you.
Well, my favourite little heat map showed him getting the majority of his possessions up around our left half forward flank. So he certainly wasn't playing a back pocket, that's for sure. That said, our whole defensive line pushed up pretty hard, and as I mentioned before, look, Hendo, he ends up with 23 disposals, and his numbers actually look okay. But I just think he's played out of position down back, and he certainly provides some qualities that are good if played in the right position, but played down back he's just a liability. I think there's room for soft outside players, but not in our back six, and if they're going to play Henderson there, we've got about 75 other options, including my grandma, rest in peace. Who could probably be tougher down back there than him. How do we see Scotty Thompson? 22 posies, couple of tackles, 3 tackles. Just a stock standard game from Scott. 7 clearances.
What was his efficiency rate though?
Yes, 68% disposal efficiency. 11 contested possessions.
That's on par for him.
Yeah.
He's never had a high disposal efficiency rate because he's often the one at the coalface getting the ball out. I actually thought it was an okay game from him. It was obvious that they were sitting on him to make it hard.
Yeah, he got a pass, Nicky.
Yeah. I thought he did some really nice things. There was some clever little stuff. His tackling improved. I think there was only the one that was high that was given away. I thought he was actually consciously making sure that he wasn't trying to give away those kind of tackles.
And he will go in.
So you can teach an old dog.
And nobody goes in harder than Tomo. That's one thing I do like about him. He is tough.
Oh, you could never question that.
Yeah.
The knock on Tomo is that it's spreading defensively, and that was painfully obvious again, against a second-string midfield, really. When you look at his numbers compared to Jared Lyons, Jared Lyons had 20 posies, 5 marks, 6 tackles, 7 inside 50s. Pretty serviceable game. Went at 90% disposal efficiency. Really, when you think about it, there's not a heck of a lot of difference between those numbers, and I felt that Jared actually was more effective with ball in hand than Scott was.
Well, Jared always he does try to always give the ball to somebody. That's one thing I'll give him. I just wish he'd get 25, 26 posies rather than 20.
Yeah, well, you know what, Macca, you're right. But then you have a look at time on ground, and you see that again, Scotty Thompson was our leading midfielder at time on ground once again. With 78, he was down under 80, which I think reflects the fact that we didn't have the Crouch boys in, who seemed to struggle to get over the 70 mark. But Scotty Thompson 78% time on ground, Rory 76, Rory Atkins 75, Richie Douglas 78, and we'll touch on him in a moment. Jared Lyons only 70, Charlie Cameron 77, Eddie Betts 84, of course ran through the midfield a little bit as well. So when you consider that Jared probably had, 10, 15 minutes less on the ground, 20 posies in that time probably doesn't stack up so badly.
Well, I don't think it does work out to 10, 20 minutes. It probably only works out to about 6 minutes, I reckon.
8%? 8% of 120? What's that, about 10 minutes in it?
I was working on 5. Well, the average midfielder was about 75 minutes, and he's about 5 down on that, and so I was working on about, say, 6. But look, perhaps I'm being harsh on him, but I just think if he's going to be able to not just fill in, or when we have to replace somebody, or in other words, just not be a regular. But if he wants to be a regular, I reckon he's just got to get his numbers up to that 25, 26 mark.
Yeah, don't disagree with that. Don't disagree with that at all. Doing that direct comparison with Scotty Thompson, though, sort of highlights to me that we can afford to give Scott a rest. If we're going to nurse him through this season, which we should, and in my mind, there's no way that Scott Thompson should have played this week. But you tried telling Tomo that he can't play. Jared probably would have lifted that possession stat up to about 25, I would have thought. So anyway, certainly not the worst. Richie Douglas had 21 stats, and yet I again was disappointed with his game. Only 5 contested possessions, so played very much on the outside. A couple of clangers, 4 clearances. It played a bit of time up forward. It just didn't set the world on fire from mine.
He's down on what he can do.
I thought he would have taken the chance to really stamp himself because he wasn't minding someone for the first time this year.
Yeah, good point, Nicky, but he didn't.
No, he didn't.
Well, I think he was the one that was actually rotating with Charlie. Well. I think he was actually rotating with Charlie a bit through the forwards and Eddie. Yeah. I think they had a little bit of a 3-way rotation going there. So he did spend a bit of time up forward. But to have such a low contested position.
And he is a clever forward.
Oh, yeah, he's quite good value up forward, no doubt about it. But his kicking's gone to the dogs over the last few weeks, so I don't know what's going on there. But, senior midfielder against a second-rate midfield, I would have expected both him and Tomo's numbers to be up around Rory Sloane's at the very least.
Yep. One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is that Gold Coast played not one loose man in defence, but at times 2 loose men in defence, and that had the effect of why we weren't as efficient in our forward lines, but also why Hendo was also running up the ground a little bit high because he was standing nobody.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's exactly right.
And if he
Sorry, go on, Nick.
And if he doesn't have anybody, why doesn't he get the ball more?
Well, he's Hendo.
Well, I mean, it certainly reflected in his inside 50 count, and also probably Brodie Smith's inside 50 count of 10. But you're right, it did impact our efficiency going inside 50, but a good team against second-rate opposition, Mac, and we should have countered that. We didn't drop the eyes nearly enough. We're still kicking balls onto people's heads to let Eddie go for Mark of the Millennium.
I loved that, though. I loved it.
That was great.
I read one of the highlights of the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
but
did the commentators.
as a tactic, it stinks to high heaven though. We just didn't hit up enough targets, and I actually felt that's where Jared Lyons shone. He actually hit up a couple of targets with some really nice passing inside 50, and I think that's actually one of Jared's strengths. His distribution by foot into the forward lines is very composed, and he generally puts it to the advantage of the forward.
All right, well, let's put it to you. Sorry, Nicky, I was just going to say. While we're online, does he play next week? Because Brad Crouch, Brad Crouch went very well in the SANFL, and he got 37 disposals. There's no SANFL game next week, so what do you do with Brad Crouch?
Well, it's an interesting question, Macca, and we'll talk quickly about this whole selection thing just after we wrap this game up. But what you say is absolutely right. There's a few mixed messages coming from selection at the moment, but let's just polish this one off first. The other bloke I just want to talk about quickly is Sam Jacobs. I felt he got beaten by Daniel Curry, actually. Certainly got beaten in the hit-out stats. I felt that had Curry kicked those couple of goals, Sam Jacobs' game would have looked pretty rank, but as it was, I felt like only just a pass from Sammy.
He worked hard.
He was actually doing well at milking some frees.
Yeah, I wasn't as disappointed as you were. I know that Curry's a sort of, in some ways, a novice ruckman, but not in terms of age, but in terms of games played. But I always thought he had a bit of ability anyhow, so I'm not surprised that he did reasonably well. But I thought Jacobs worked away at his game. He wasn't our worst.
He did take some nice grabs. He provided some good link. He did stuff up a nice little bit through the centre because he thought the handball was too high and didn't realise that there was a player directly behind him, and that's why the handball was going over the top of him. But then he worked very hard once he realised that he'd stuffed it up. And to keep it in a contested situation. He was a lot better than what he was last week. I think his judgment, which has been a little off, him and Tex, it's kind of interesting that both of them, that they've had this issue regarding judging the ball this year.
I'd like to point out that whilst I think you're being very kind to what was nearly an All-Australian ruckman not that long ago, Sammy Jacobs spent around about 80% time on ground. Daniel Curry rucked for the whole game. 95% time on ground. 95% time on ground for a ruckman. I actually think Sammy got towed up and there's a real problem with him at the moment.
Well, we've got no alternative, so we just got to love it anyhow.
Yeah, but it just begs the question, what's going on? I mean, we as I said, a couple of years ago, we had a borderline All-Australian ruckman on our hands, and we were all very excited by his agility and his tap work and all the rest of it. And now we have someone who struggles to break even in centre bounces and around the ground, doesn't provide a huge amount, almost playing like a link man in the current setup, I've noticed, which is rather odd, but just not effective. Whereas Todd Goldstein has gone from strength to strength.
Very good point, because he's not leaving the ground. I don't know whether he's carrying an injury or not, and he is playing more like a link man than anything else. But you're right. A couple of years ago, he used to come into the centre bounce and he would leap over the top of them. But he's not really barely leaving the ground at the moment. As I said, he worked hard, but yeah, you're right. He wasn't anywhere near at the very best that he can be.
Nick,
yeah, that's why I think
Sammy?
there's something. No, that's why, as I said, I think there's something up because his judgment of the flight of the ball has just been so off. It was pleasing to see that it has actually seemed to have turned around and he was getting back to it being better. I agree with you both that it's still well below the standard that we know he can get to, which makes me think that, yeah, there's something going on there.
Yeah, time will tell. That probably, unless anyone's got anything else they want to raise, that probably wraps it up from the point of view of the stats. I'd like to spend a minute just expanding on...
Oh, the one other thing.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't talked about Hartigan. I thought he played another good game. Because he was actually on Tom Lynch at the start of the game and annoying the crap out of him. I love seeing it. Hartigan's got this real little bit of mongrel about him.
Oh, no doubt. I don't think Hartigan's put a foot wrong since he's come back.
No, I think that combination of him and Talia actually worked really well.
Yeah, and they do rotate off the players, which makes it a little bit hard for the player to settle down when you've got two different... You've got Talia, who's almost like a second skin on you, and then you've got Hartigan, who doesn't mind being a little bit physical with you.
I just felt at times Kyle got caught out of position a little bit. There were mismatches out the back when Gold Coast managed to get it over our midfield coming out of their defence, and as I said before, often we were mismatched with Kyle on a right or on a Lynch, and obviously he's not going to win too many of those contests. So I thought Hartigan at times just got sucked a little bit too far forward, but I don't know whether that's him or whether that was what the game plan demanded. But certainly in one-on-one he hasn't put a foot wrong, and you're right, Lynch got a bit aggro at one stage there, and Hartigan was niggling him quite nicely, so he's good value, I reckon.
And looking at the umpire to make sure that the umpire saw it, so he got the free.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. All right, so let's just talk about this whole selection issue, and we've done it to death in terms of who was picked this week, but how do we see changes next week in terms of the midfield and matching up against a very fast GWS midfield?
And that's what we need to bring in is some speed.
We don't have any.
Otherwise, yeah. Well, we're going to get smashed.
I was going to ask if you were going to play, Nikki, because I can't see where the speed's going to go.
No.
Where's the speed going to come from?
Oh, I'm slow. I'm old and slow. So I reckon you're right about getting Brad back in because he does actually have some speed, but he hasn't been using it. We know he is actually quick. It's just he kind of hasn't believed in himself in order to do that.
Well, I reckon he must come.
Lyons, even though he's slow physically, he makes very...
Yeah, but...
Yeah,
but I reckon, Nikki...
I still want to see him in.
I want him back in too because he goes back to the SANFL and in a losing game he gets 37 possessions and next week there won't be a game for him. That's not going to help him at all. And if we really do want to do all right come September, we'd have to have a Brad Crouch really firing. And the only way he's going to do that is to play games. And yeah, he probably deserved to be dropped as a wake-up call, but he responded to that, and I think he's got to come back in.
Macca, he had 36 possessions before he got brought back in. I don't think you can actually put too much store on the possession count in the SANFL.
For me, when he got those 36 possessions against South, most of them were handballs, and I wasn't happy with how he played. I thought he actually didn't play well even with that 36 possessions. By the sounds of it on the weekend, he was actually a bit more equal in terms of his kicks and his
19,
handball.
18.
Now it's nice it's nice that he did that. We still lost.
Yeah, but I think that...
So without seeing the game, I can't make an effective judgment. As long as if he was told he needed to work on some things, if that's what he did and they're happy with him, then yes, back in. But if he was still doing... We know he is a ball magnet in the SANFL. If he hadn't done what they were telling him to work on. Yes, I know they're not playing next weekend, but maybe for his development, he shouldn't come back in. But that's a big if because we don't know.
Yeah, but I can't see what. I don't know how he's ever going to improve it if. Your point, Phoenix, is that he got 30 odd possessions last time he went back to the SANFL. Okay, so you leave him there and he rots away there just getting 30 odd possessions, and that doesn't mean a thing. What matters is when he comes into the AFL team and he goes all right, and he won't know unless he plays.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point, Macca. He should never. And for mine, he should never have been dropped. Because every time he gets dropped, he'll go back and get you 35 to 40 touches in the SANFL because he's just too damn good for that bloody competition.
Yeah.
I want to see a bit of the pressure taken off Brad Crouch. And I know Peter J reckons he's got a few attitude problems. I take a different view. I want to see him around the ground a bit. I want to see him actually gain some confidence at the level instead of being thrown into the coalface. And we've got senior midfielders that should be standing up. Sloane Thompson and Douglas in particular, and Sloaney obviously is, but the other two, particularly over the last 2-3 weeks, not so much. Brad Crouch needs to be doing the same sort of thing as what we saw from Charlie Cameron on the weekend, having cameos in there and being allowed to play around the ground as well, get a touch, get his feel, and increase his numbers in the midfield over the course of the season. He should never have been dropped. The stats in the SANFL are meaningless because he's always going to get them. And I think it was a failed selection. His game, all that was going to happen with Brad Crouch in the twos is he was going to get injured. There's no other value.
Well, I was one of those who called for him to be dropped because I thought he gave us a pretty...
He was putrid.
Yeah, he was. And the only thing... you are right that he gets nothing out of it in terms of improving his game going back. But it was more about letting him know that you're just not an automatic selection, son. We expect better than that from you. And he's gone back and he's played another very good game. And hopefully, if you put him back in this week, he'll give you a much better performance because he knows that he's just not an automatic selection.
Yeah,
right,
but hang on a second.
I'm with Macca on that.
No. Yeah, well, that's fine. If you want to send that message, that's fine. But then why are you playing Douglas?
I can't answer that.
And that's what pisses young players off. And this has been my point all along. I cannot see the bigger picture in terms of selection at the moment. If you're going to give gold tickets to senior players who are not only not performing but severely underperforming like Dougie has over the last couple of weeks, then it's a bit harsh to tell a kid who's been brought back prematurely after a 12-month layoff to go back to the twos because you're not quite up to the scratch. And when he's looking at Douglas sputting it up, I don't think it's actually the right message to send. You either send it team-wide or you don't use that approach. And to me, the only way that Brad is going to get better and provide more value to us is AFL minutes.
Can't argue with that. I'm totally in that camp.
And Matt Crouch the same. I mean, all right, he was sore, so he didn't play, and that's fine. But we are actually putting a lot of pressure on two lads who are sub-50 game midfielders. And our problem, I don't think, is those two boys. The problem is at the senior end with blokes not pulling their weight.
They're not supporting them.
Matt Crouch shouldn't be relied on to get plus 25 possessions a game. If he gets them, fantastic. But it shouldn't be relied upon to get 25 plus. Same with Brad Crouch. I'd rather see Brad get 20 quality possessions running in and out of the midfield, maybe spending a bit of time on the wing, maybe a bit up forward. Let him get a feel for the game without saying, well, shit, you're our Paddy Dangerfield replacement, so, let's have 30 quality possessions from you, mate, or else you're out.
All right. Well, I agree with both your comments, but I would bring in both Brad and Matt, and that's presuming that Matt is fit enough to play this week. So if you bring them in, who goes out?
Douglas.
Well, are we going to talk about who's going to go out, or are we going to talk about who do we think should go out? Because they're two very different conversations.
I'm asking you who you think should go out.
Who I think should go out, I think Nathan Van Berlo needs to be discarded. And out of our midfield rotation, I think Richard Douglas needs a break. And I also think Scott Thompson needs a break. If we're going to play GWS on a fast deck with their midfield, then we can do no worse than to inject as much pace into that midfield as we possibly can. And I would imagine Lyons is a good coalface midfielder. I think Matt Crouch coming in is a good coalface midfielder. Rory Sloane can play in and out. We need some outside speed so that we've got some spread, because that's where they're going to kill us the same way that Geelong beat us, is basically crunching up numbers into the contest and then beating us on the spread out of the contest.
Yeah, and that'll happen again with GWS. I can't actually see us beating them because I watched them today beating the Bulldogs, and their midfield is frightening, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But then again, they were playing on a larger ground, and the Bulldogs' game plan proved doesn't work on those larger grounds. But GWS, I have been watching them all year. They are very good.
And Vuddy Magic makes a very good point on the chat. He says, Dougie got BOG by some scribes on the weekend. It actually blows my mind. I don't know whether that's Adelaide Football Club propaganda or whatnot, or whether just some journalists don't look at the game, but he was ineffective in my opinion.
They might have had a darts tournament after the game, and he was best at that. I don't know.
He wasn't too bad at the start of the game. I thought, he's been released. We're gonna, see the old Dougie back, and then he just went quiet.
Yeah, that's
so. They obviously watched the first. They obviously watched the first quarter and then switched it over to watch Collingwood Geelong.
Yep. Look, I think as I've been banging on about for weeks now, I'm struggling to see the bigger picture with selection and with game plan. We're not a premiership contender this year. A lot of things would have to go our way and go wrong for other teams for us to be in with any sort of realistic chance. So you don't have to verbalise that to the players, but I think as a selection committee, we need to be looking at what we want our next premiership midfield to look like. Richard Douglas isn't part of that premiership midfield in my view. Scott Thompson isn't part of that premiership midfield in my view. So if you're going to play those two, you play them limited minutes in the midfield and give them more time in other areas around the ground. We need to sink time into our second generation midfielders, A, because they need the experience, and B, because we don't even know if they're good enough yet. Blokes like Ellis Yeoman and those blokes, we don't even know whether Cam's good enough. I think he's got a role to play, but let's at least play him and see whether we need another player or two in that midfield or whether Cam's going to fill a role.
Can't argue with that at all. We've had that trio of players, of which Lyons is one of them, that have been around the place but not quite good enough to get a regular spot in the team, and rarely played actually. So as you said, we don't really know whether we should be keeping them, getting rid of them, or what we should be doing, because what we've got at the moment, I don't think is going to get us there at all.
And I think this is where we are hurt. Sorry, Nick. I just finished this one off. I think this is where we've been hurt by the high number of coaches that we've had over the past, half a dozen years. I think every coach coming in, the first thing they do is look at how Adelaide have lined up, and whilst there are no free tickets with a new coach, he tends to play conservatively to start off with. And every time those blokes have been knocked back into the pack, down the pecking order because of a new coach. And there's been no continuity, and I think blokes like Lyons and Ellis Yeoman and guys like that have really suffered, and our midfield has really suffered because the new coach just goes to the old guard every time.
Well, that's a natural thing to do, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're a new coach coming in, you're trying to protect your own ass too. So you go for the ones that have been proven that they can at least get the ball, rather than gamble on the ones that might get the ball.
Exactly. We saw Walshy, use Cam Ellis-Yeoman to good effect at the beginning of last year, and as soon as Campo gets on board, I don't know what happened to Cam, but he disappeared. And Mitch Grigg has stagnated. Not that he's demanded selection, but he's stagnated. one or two others as well. It must be disappointing and deflating for these guys. Sammy Kerridge was another one that I think we're going to end up missing. Bernie Vince, for that matter, another one. And we're so light on now in the midfield. It's hard to see us developing a premiership contending midfield over the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, but I think that's got to be our prime objective is to try and lure somebody away from another team, whatever team that might be. And I know it's not easy to do so because every one of the 18 teams is trying to do that, but we really need it.
I want Prestia.
Yeah, well, Prestia and Lachie Neale are obviously the 2 midfield targets that you'd be going to, but then when I say something like, well, we're going to have to give up Jenkins for Lachie Neale, everyone goes, you're an idiot. Well, have a look at Jenkins' numbers and you think, well, shit, that's not a bad deal. We gave away a solid midfielder for a speculative forward last year. I think Jenkins is still a speculative hot and cold forward. We've got plenty of options up forward, and we need a midfielder, and Lachie Neale, I think, is the one.
Yeah, but then I think you get the job done with the first round draft pick, and at worst, the next year's second, if that's the case. But I wouldn't be giving up players.
Playing devil's advocate for a little bit here, because you're discussing about having to get that youth in and in the midfield and giving them time to get up to speed with the game, etc. You notice we've done it up forward and we've done it down back. Because we've been doing it in those areas, could that be why they've sat with the old guard in that midfield?
Very good point, Nikki.
Look, it's quite possible,
because
Nick.
Last year with Charlie, this year with Charlie's, I think he's become one of the more senior players in there, but we've got McGovern, who's learning the game down there. We're very happy that he doesn't get high numbers, but they're backing him in just to get, that game time into him, because I think if we can hang on to him, he's going to be a handful come out forward. And his dad's probably right that he's probably the better McGovern out of the two of them. And down back, you think we left Laird in. Hartigan now, you have to remember that he's still quite young in terms of game time. So we had Laird, Hartigan and Brown down there that we let go to develop, and Lever. So for me, whilst you started to talk about it, and I kept thinking, well, I think that's why we went with more seniority in the middle.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there, Nikki, and I think Miller was the first step in going in putting something into the midfield. As you say, we put plenty into the forward line, we put plenty into the back line, and they will only get better and better. But in the midfield, we haven't put very much into that. In fact, we've lost players, as Phoenix pointed out, and Miller will, I think, long term be a very, very quick outside mid playing on the ball, and I think he'll be very, very good. But we do need another hard nut in the centre that can, and also I'd love to have 2 more. I'd like to have another hard nut in the centre, and I'd love to have another one on the outside. Brad Crouch could be that one on the inside, but we definitely need another really quality mid.
Well, I think we've been going with youth, particularly in defence, Nicky, out of necessity. We haven't actually had too many blokes knocking down the door, and when you've got Henderson and VB as the next men up when 1 or 2 go down, Jake Kelly's probably a little bit unlucky, and I'd much rather see him get game time than Henderson.
I think he would have.
I know he got injured, so but we've got.
Yeah.
And you're right. Mitch McGovern was the surprise, probably so far of the season. You always thought Miller might get a game or 2, but Mitch McGovern sort of came out of left field and done very well. But it doesn't help if you're not getting the freaking ball enough. When we play GWS next week, I think we're going to get a 10-goal hiding. and a lot of it is going to be a similar look to what we saw against Geelong, where they just absolutely smash us on the spread.
Yeah, I expect the game to look very, very similar to the Geelong game.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on the game coming up? Obviously, we'll cover that in more detail on Tuesday and Thursday nights, but it's an interesting little dilemma at the moment, selection-wise, and it's hard to know exactly what the selection committee are doing at the moment. I think they're overrating some players and underrating a couple of others, and as a result, we just don't seem to have the right balance in the midfield at the moment.
You said there's a difference between what we would do and what the selectors would do. What do you think the selectors will do?
I don't think there'll be any unforced changes, Macca.
You can't see Brad Crouch coming back in?
Nope.
I would think that's very wrong if he doesn't.
Look, mate, I agree. I'm the guy that reckons he should never have gotten dropped in the first place. But why would you pick him underdone, play him into the ground, then drop him for underperforming, and then bring him straight back in after one game? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
It didn't make any sense in hindsight, dropping him in the first place.
No, but it leads me to believe that he's going to be given a few out before he comes back in. I don't think we'll see Brad Crouch until after the bye.
I hope you're wrong.
So do I.
Yeah, I'm going to wait and see kind of the noises that we hear from the club before I make a guess as to what's going to go on.
Well, talk about noises from the club. I must admit, I was a little bit disappointed to hear the coach say he was very happy with the way the game was played. I would have thought that he was happy in a sense that we won and that there were times we played well, but I think he should have really put a little bit more emphasis on the fact that particularly in the last quarter, we didn't really finish the game off.
He doesn't do that publicly. If you watch the players sing the song after the game, they knew they weren't happy. They were flat and they're like, oh, we're going to cop it. And I think they might have.
Well, they should have.
But he will not do it publicly.
I think
he's very good at giving you nothing.
One of the things that I've heard is that he's created a very positive, what they term working environment down there, and I don't think that would be enhanced by public sledging. I think we became very used very quickly and enjoyed Walshy's hard on sleeve comments at times. Pikey's not like that. I don't think you're going to get anything out of Don Pike at a press conference.
He's cleverer than he's much cleverer than the journalists.
Yeah, he doesn't give anything away at all. The one thing that does disappoint me is that there just seems to be a little bit of old school Adelaide Crows seeping back in. A little bit of spin, a little bit of this, and I like what was going on when Fagan came to the club and Walshy came to the club and Reid, took a leadership role. I liked what was going on and the noises coming out of the club, and it just seems to me that we've just fallen back from that a little bit. Certainly fallen back, in my view, from elite standards. Different coach, different mantras, I guess, but it doesn't seem to have the same vitality about it that it did this time last year.
No, look, and that was the thing that I was disappointed about, but I'm prepared to accept what Nicky said. The fact is that perhaps the things that I would have liked him to have said publicly might be said behind closed doors and maybe even stronger than what would have been said publicly. Yeah,
quite possibly. Look, I think that's probably all we need to talk about for this week. We're pushing up close to the hour. I'll just quickly run through the SANFL result. Obviously, Central's got up 15 goals, 9.99 to Adelaide, 12 goals for 76. Pretty substandard last quarter by the looks of it from us, but there must have been a breeze. Was there, Nick? Did you go?
No, because it was on exactly the same time.
No, of course, yeah, but 5 goals to 2 in the last, and they basically won by 3 goals. So
I listened a little bit. Seemed they had a bit more run, and I think the radio was saying there was a bit of a breeze.
Yeah, judging by the quarter-by-quarter scores, it looks like there was a bit of a breeze, and it looks like we actually lost the game in the first quarter when they outscored us in what appears to be into the breeze, unless the wind swung around. But obviously Crouchy had 37, Mitch Grigg had 28, Jake Kelly 27, really good game from him by all accounts. 5 rebound 50s, 4 tackles, 7 marks. Andy Otten also 23 disposals, quite a solid game. Might be a sneaky chance to come back in. He's very much the forgotten man at the moment. Cam Ellis-Yeoman's numbers probably a little down, 23, probably half a foot on the bloody plane to Brisbane, so probably a bit disoriented there in terms of where he was supposed to play
Wig was
this
on
week.
there instead.
Yeah, I know, but Cam probably thought he should have been picked, and so he already had a bag pack.
That was interesting that we took Wig up and we allowed him to miss this game.
Actually stupid, because he misses next week as well. I mean, I just don't understand.
Yeah.
The whole thing doesn't make much sense at all, really. I thought selection last week was the most confusing I've seen for a long, long time.
That business of taking somebody up with you when you go away interstate it is a very common practice because of the fact that if somebody injures themselves in the warm-up, you can replace them.
Yeah, but why Harry Wig?
Well, often we do. Well, he was obviously the next one they wanted to bring in.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like a little pat on the back and say you're getting close, mate.
But this is a guy that hasn't played a game,
also,
and we need him to get, maintain his form and all the rest of it. Harry Wig's not going to play now for 3 weeks, so whatever form he had is going to be well and truly wiped out by a 3-week break.
Well, yeah,
he might be smoky to come in next week.
Well, wouldn't be the worst selection, but who's he going to come in for? Henderson? I doubt it.
No, he won't be coming
please.
Just some of our midfield in the twos looks a little disappointing. Gore only 15 touches, John O'Beach 15. Troy Menzel apparently started off well, kicked a couple of goals early, but ended up only with 14 touches. Keenan Ramsey with 13. So, just a there or thereabouts performance. Harry Deer's numbers are very low at the moment. I don't know whether you've got a read on that, Nick.
I think his movement around the ground's been really good. It's just we've had some shock and delivery into the forward lines, which hasn't helped. But what I've seen of him, he's hard at the footy. He's playing key position forward, and you have to remember that prior to him coming to play with us last year, he'd played 8 games of football in 3 years because he'd been injured. So he's one that, okay, yes, he's a bit low in numbers, but I've been pleased with what I've seen of him doing and working.
What about Menzel? What about Menzel, though, Nikki? How is he getting close?
I think he's got to fix up his diet, from what I understand. He's kind of been a little bit
really
naughty, and it's like he's had a little bit of slacking off. But from what I've seen when he's on there, he gives everything that he's got, and I think we're slowly building his tank up. So I reckon he might be a chance towards the end of the year.
But I mean, that's what's so disappointing, to trade for a guy that's supposed to have a bit of a reputation, and we're saying he eats too many cheeseburgers.
Yeah, especially when we traded the fittest man at the club for him.
Yeah, but the fittest man at the club does not have the talent of Troy Menzel.
Don't know, he's going right at the
Simple as
moment.
that.
Only one of them's playing A-grade footy at the moment. Doesn't matter, only one of them's playing A-grade football at the moment. We're only ranked one game behind
There is an
Carlton.
age difference. Yes,
Right.
and there is an age difference between the pair of them.
You mean younger blokes
We
eat
got
more
rid of somebody-
cheeseburgers?
And remember, it does take a little while to de-Carltonise people.
Not buying that shit. Not buying that shit at all. Troy Menzel's getting a second chance, and he should be grabbing it with both hands. And if he's at Macca's drive-through more than he's out doing laps, there's something wrong with his head.
I'm with you, Phoenix.
And we got rid of a solid player for him.
That was the rumour.
Oh, yeah, it's been.
I don't know if it's true.
Well, it's been openly stated by the club that they've got to get him up to match fitness standards.
Yeah, and watching him play, watching him training in pre-season, he was well behind everybody else. He does not have the fitness that we require. But what pleased me was the fact that he never really dropped his head. He was so far behind everybody else, but he still kept pushing. So from what I saw there is a desire from him to get there. You can't just create that fitness overnight. Sam Kerridge was with us for how many years? He came in as an elite endurance athlete already, so he had quite a good fitness base, and he was with us for a number of years. Whereas basically Menzel's never done a preseason because he's been injured, and then they would play him in the AFL even though he didn't have the fitness to do so. I think Carlton did him a disservice by doing that, and we're trying to fix it.
Yeah, quite possibly. But the fact remains is that at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, we overpaid for him. And he's certainly one I think that needs to start repaying the faith. And I'm disappointed that he's not pushing a bit harder for selection. I accept that his fitness levels weren't right and all the rest of it. But I can see a forward line next year with Troy Menzel in it, as well as Harry Deer with Josh Jenkins over at Freo and Lachie Neale running around getting 40 touches for us. Troy Menzel's a key part of that little equation, and we need him, particularly if we want to run Cameron up through the midfield, because we're going to need that second dynamic forward to play alongside Eddie. So Troy needs to get his skates on.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Look,
It's not happening at all, though, Nikki, I don't think.
No, he's actually running games out in the SNFL not too badly. We are resting him a little bit longer on the bench is what I've noticed. So I think we would have had him out there longer if we could. He wasn't helped by the concussion that he had as well. And the start of that game, he started like a house on fire. He was ripping Glenelg apart. And then he got the concussion, which didn't help. So I think you've got to take that into account as well.
Yep, no doubt. But the jury's well and truly out. And look, I'm as hopeful as you are, Nick, that he comes good and fulfills his potential because he's got buckets of it. Let's just hope. The last bloke I just want to touch on briefly is an interesting prospect. Is Greenwood had another decent game. 18 touches, 16 by foot, 4 grabs, 4 tackles, 7 clearances, 4 inside 50s. Pretty solid game from the basketballer.
I would not be surprised at all if he has an NFL game to his name towards the end of the year.
He's an interesting one, isn't he? Because apparently he's very, very quick, isn't he, Nicky?
He's quick. He's got that beautiful hang time that he jumps in the air. He's hard at the footy. He's just, unlike a certain other basketball, does not take a step backwards, and he's very willing to tackle hard. And he's just one of those who seems to have time when he gets the ball, and invariably makes good decisions.
But doesn't he play up forward?
He plays up forward and also through the midfield. So I think the aim for him is to eventually be that tall midfielder. So he will be our Embley.
That would be good. Yeah.
Interesting. And Riley O'Brien, 33 hit-outs versus Central's Ruckman, 17. Had a good game, 12-odd disposals. And, I guess if Jacobs does fall over or needs a rest or is injured, at least Riley's in good nick.
Yeah, he is. And he's very young. He's still a little raw at times. But I've been very pleased with his development from last year and even into this year. And he does look like a mini Jacobs.
Yeah. Well,
except I think he's about the same height, but...
Yeah, it's a little bit redder though, Nicky.
Yeah, it's because he hasn't shaved his head yet.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to an end. We've probably rabbled on longer than we should have, but hopefully people out there listening have enjoyed the debate. It's been quite lively tonight, and I think that's reflective of where we are. so far this season. A little bit of the crossroads, I'd imagine. So thanks, Macca, for popping in again. It's been good to have you again.
Anytime, mate.
And Nikki, good to have you back on deck, and hopefully the ice packs are doing the trick for you.
Yeah.
Don't forget, we've got the Crowbar Boys on deck, so their podcast will be available for listening on Monday night, and then we've obviously got Tuesday Night Live with a cast of thousands on Tuesday, and then Scorpus' preview on Thursday ahead of the big match versus GWS. So until then, thanks very much, guys. Thanks all for listening, and we'll see you later.
Yep, good night.
Bye.
All.